When I first heard that marriage in Fear and Hunger had the ability to restore your character's lost limbs and heal virtually any injury, I couldn't help but laugh. It's certainly not uncommon for marriage in RPGs to provide a healing buff, but I thought it just a step too far. And then I learned in-game that the old gods perceived marriage as a literal, physical merging of human beings rather than a metaphorical one, with both halves of the married couple fusing together to form terrifying flesh abominations. And yet, although viscerally disturbing to look at, marriage as a game mechanic has fascinating implications for the way the old gods perceive humanity and the concepts they represent. So, without further ado, let's more closely examine them. Marriage as a ritual is performed in Sylvian's name, the Fear and Hunger goddess of love, fertility, and creation. While this type of goddess is one that may at first appear familiar to us, it's worth mentioning that every god in Fear and Hunger is the living embodiment of the concepts they represent, and therefore may not appear in accordance with the qualities that we associate with those concepts. We traditionally view love and fertility goddesses as kind, benevolent, motherly beings, and while Sylvian may embody love's more tender moments, she is simultaneously it in all its most twisted, violent forms. Sylvian is obsession. Sylvian is lust. Sylvian is unrelenting and unwavering devotion. Her definition of a loving union is not inherently a healthy or healing one, having little if outright nothing to do with mutual care and companionship, and significantly more to do with the complete eradication of what once was oneself. Because to Sylvian, destruction does not oppose, suppress, or inhibit creation. It is the very thing necessary to facilitate it. It's for this reason that Sylvian has found her ideal match in Grogorath, the Fear and Hunger deity of destruction, sacrifice, and chaos. While initially, we'd assume their realms are fundamentally opposed to each other, the volume Studies of Grogorath states that destruction is seen as a part of the natural order, with death being necessary to pave the way for growth, making creation and destruction forces in this universe that are inextricably intertwined. One cannot exist without the other. Fans have pointed out that Grogorath is an entity that when you encounter him is capable of tearing you apart piece by piece, bestowing upon you injuries that require you to use his mate Sylvian's healing gift. Here, destruction fuels creation and creation prompts destruction in turn. And in the way these concepts are linked together, so then are the deities that embody these concepts, and I feel a fantastic example of this lies in the methods of worship their respective cults employ. In Fear and Hunger, Sylvian and Grogorath are worshipped by cultists known simply as bunny masks and wolf masks respectively. Between the two, it's the wolf masks that have the more traditionally horrifying methods of worship, with them venerating Grogorath through consuming their and their peers' flesh. But that being said, the bunny masks, despite being considerably less physically violent, are by no means a pleasant alternative, also indulging openly in the various delights of the flesh. The bunny masks must venerate Sylvian through acts of physical intimacy, which in of itself doesn't seem to be terrible, especially when compared to the wolf masks, but the bunny masks run the risk of losing themselves in this ritual entirely, potentially dooming themselves to spend the rest of their days as little more than a writhing, anonymous body. And yet although these rituals contrast, one demanding an act of violence and the other an act of tenderness, they both perfectly reflect the relationship between destruction and creation previously described. The wolf masks, in devouring parts of themselves and those surrounding them, simultaneously provide themselves the sustenance they need to survive within the dungeons, whereas bunny masks, in pledging themselves to the act that prompts the creation of human life and that act exclusively, simultaneously lose anything that defines their unique personhood, names, faces, and so on. Both Grogorath and Sylvian are venerated through acts of consumption. Grogorath's preferred methods of worship are the most literal they possibly can be in this regard, with us typically perceiving destruction as a devouring, insatiable driving force. But Sylvian's are more abstract. Blood and flower magic provides further insight into this idea of love as consumption, with it describing marriage as no longer having to fear for separation from your loved ones, it being a true act of love that creates a beautiful unison for two souls, when in reality, it is the eradication of oneself. This definition is one that seems to suggest that Sylvian perceives love as the exertion of control over the relinquishment of it. In her eyes, it's physical, it's destructive, it's the incineration of everything that once made up oneself. Love in Sylvian's eyes is blind integration, something stemming from mankind's desperate, ever-present desire to live over something stemming from mutual care and companionship. Marriages in-game are created as last resort attempts to survive, with characters only agreeing to enter a marriage with you because they recognize the danger these dungeons pose, and would ultimately rather a fraction of themselves escape than nothing at all. There's no element of romance, it's a crude act done in what you believe to be your best interest, suggesting that Sylvian may perceive love as something meant to ensure survival over something that signifies genuine connection. However, there's another potential angle we can view Sylvian's perception of love through if we take into account her former history with mankind and physical appearance. According to Fear and Hunger's lore, mankind was created when Sylvian requested a god named Vitruvia to construct a man and a woman in her image, with Sylvian falling so deeply in love with the results that she created mankind. However, it's quite important to note that Sylvian, as an entity that possesses both male and female physical qualities, can only see herself mirrored in mankind through acts of love. Hence why showing love is the highest act of praise you possibly can offer her, as it's the only way in which she can see the image of herself reflected in her creations. Yet although creating a marriage is the highest act of praise you possibly can offer Sylvian, it's simultaneously one she will reject and punish should she perceive it as insincere. If the marriage is meant to be viewed as a reflection of Sylvian herself, should you attempt to distort this reflection by incorporating a third person, you will create an abominable marriage, a creature that has deliberately had every feature that could identify it as human stripped away. Furthermore, an abominable marriage is not allowed to partake in the bunny mask's rituals, permanently sealing it off from communing with Sylvian. However, an abominable marriage, although presumably disgraceful, is still functional, suggesting that distorting this image is not the greatest sin you can possibly commit in Sylvian's eyes. But if that is the case, then what is this great sin? It's simple: venerating a rival deity on the same circle you use to request her for her greatest blessing. Despite being the creator of humanity, by the time that we reach the current events of Fear and Hunger, Sylvian has grown to detest them, realizing her creations are incapable of providing her the displays of devotion and love she truly craves. Humanity's rejection of ritual marriage, the thing that Sylvian perceives as being the greatest possible gift she could have bestowed upon them, has caused her to develop a deep rage and resentment that exists alongside her previous devotion. And to witness these same beings demand this gift of her after having explicitly pledged themselves to another deity likely pushes her to her absolute limits. Yet if you worship her prior to this, she will be able to squash her resentment long enough to bestow upon you her blessing, as twisted as we may perceive it to be, restoring you to completion in a body that now reflects her visage. It's further worth noting there's another component to ensuring a marriage's success, and that is that as the player, your partner must be a willing participant. Failure to ensure they are won't just result in merely the marriage's failure. It means instant death for the character that attempted to initiate. Numerous old gods oppose this approach rather than just Sylvian and Sylvian alone, suggesting that to attempt to commit a heinous act like this is a direct affront to the universe itself. A view the old gods, the gods that were supposed to restore humanity's power back to itself, don't seem to share as well. There are 2 failed marriages we actually witness in-game, but only one consists of characters we know, and that is the marriage between Sir Seymour and Buckman. While the exact reason their marriage failed is never clarified, the most likely explanation is that as agents of the Kingdom of Rondon, Buckman and Sir Seymour likely worshipped Almer as opposed to Sylvian. But to Sylvian, this offense is worse than just being discarded in favor of another power, because according to Almer's origin story, Almer was created after Vitruvia noticed flaws in their initial version of mankind, which was drawn specifically in Sylvian's image, suggesting that too was flawed. Almer was Vitruvia's attempt to perfect humanity, and in creating him, elevated his image beyond that of Sylvian's, making him the worst possible deity to align with over Sylvian if your goal was to avoid her wrath. However, there's another more chilling element at play here, and that is the fact that it's extremely likely Sir Seymour and Buckman had no idea what exactly a marriage would do. As a matter of fact, it seems the majority of the other characters have no feasible clue, with the exception of Enki, some even responding to the idea of conducting the ritual with enthusiasm, not the response that most would have in the event they knew what they were about to do would destroy themselves. Sylvian, to them, is a healing goddess that will ordinarily heal wounds in the event that an act of love is performed in her name. So why should they reasonably assume the healing they'd receive would come at the expense of their individual personhood? And to me, this is precisely the thing that makes the marriage among the most horrifying mechanics in the entire game. In the event that you do know, it signifies how dire your circumstances must be for you to be willing to reduce yourself to fragments just to ensure a portion of yourself survives. But in the event that you don't, it's a devastating example of the consequences the dungeon bestows upon you for an act as simple and innocuous and human as seeking touch and comfort. Thank you for delving the dungeons with us, and if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And here's an extra special thank you to our Patreons. What we do would not be possible without your support. If you would like to count yourself among them, the link is in the description. Thank you so much for your time, and have a fabulous day.